Okay, I think that we can start. And if there are any other participants that will join us later, they will come. First of all, thank you for all of you that you join us for this second in the role training on how to assess and measure state capture and corruption on sectoral level. I would like also to thank especially our donor, the DG Home of the European Commission, which makes possible the development of these methodologies that we will present today to you and that have been piloted thanks to the financial support of DG Home. I should notice actually here that we at the Center for the Study of Democracy are working on the development of these methodologies since maybe more than 6 years, actually, and part of these methodologies have been developed and piloted not only in this project that I will present in a while, but also in other projects and in other countries. So, for example, the Magpie methodology or the monitoring anti-corruption policy implementation in institutions that my colleague Alexander will present in today's training has been developed for the first time in 2009, if I'm not wrong, and has been actually implemented by more than 15 institutions across Europe. And we are very proud that these institutions find this methodology quite useful and very useful and important for monitoring their anti-corruption setup. First of all, before to start the training, I would like to say a few words about the rules. There are two presentations, as you know, for today, and after each presentation, there will be a possibility for Q&A session, but please use the chat box only for general comments, while all the questions that you would like to ask, even during the presentations, please put them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And then the presenter will answer your questions. And also, you have the possibility to ask by yourself your questions. So if you raise hand, for example, or put a question in the QA box, during the QA session, you will be unmuted and you can ask by yourself directly the question. Please keep short the questions and comments that you probably would have, so other people to have also chance to participate. I just want to say that these two methodologies that we'll present today, even if they looked as separate one, they are, as I will show you in a while, they are designed and developed with the idea to be part of a bigger set of methodologies that allows for integrated assessment and regular monitoring of state capture and processes and corruption related activities on sectoral level. So it's not look at these methodologies or think about these methodologies as something which is possible to be used separately, but also as part of a more integrated and synthesis approach for studying state capture and corruption. With this, I will continue directly with the first presentation, which is about, just to share my screen, which is about the risk analysis of corruption-related behavior in public procurement. As I said, this methodology particularly was actually for the first time developed and piloted in this project, and the project is State Capture Estimation and Monitoring of Anti-Corruption Policies at the sectoral level, or SCIMAPS, and it was focused on 3 critical sectors, which we selected based on our preliminary analysis as sectors that are more prone to corruption and state capture. These are wholesale of fuels, wholesale of pharmaceuticals, and construction. And the geographical coverage of the project and the pilot was on 4 European countries: Bulgaria, Italy, Romania, and Spain. To understand how we develop this methodology, we should start from the overall concept of state capture that we have developed years ago. We define state capture as a combination of different forms of corruption, which have a single objective: to secure large-scale and long-term privileges to captors by exploiting the power of government for private benefit. And when we are talking about government here, we're talking both for local governments, like municipality, for example, and also for any other level of government, regional, national, and so on. So any governance institutions, let's say. The key characteristic of state capture actually is the public traces it leaves behind. Because it needs to affect public policy, it is bound to leave visible effects, which can be discovered by suitable pattern finding methods. And the methodology that I will present is actually this kind of pattern finding methods. So it looks at some traces that the captors, in this case of risk analysis of public procurement, the captors in most of the cases are business enterprises or business conglomerates, and the persons behind them. So the captors needs to affect the activities of contracting entities, in this case, or public institutions that are contractors of public tenders, in a way to secure privileged access to procurement funds. And in our concept is based on the model that you see on the diagram on the right side. It has 4 dimensions, and we are focused on the business capture dimension particularly. And also it has 2 types of enablers, institutional and environmental enablers, that measure the environment in which these processes of state capture happen. In our case, Within the Scheme Apps project, we focused only on institutional enablers and on the business capture dimension. And this specific methodology for risk analysis of public procurement data is focused on the privileged access to procurement as one of the important factors that as one of the important components of business capture. So when we're talking about business capture, we are talking about how businesses in general could capture government institutions, public institutions, in a way to secure to exploit the power of these public institutions for their private benefit. As I mentioned in the beginning, we used an integrated approach which combined three mutually complementary methodologies and their respective research instruments. The first one is the so-called state capture assessment diagnostic on economic sectors level. It was presented yesterday by my colleague Alexander, and it assessed state capture symptoms and vulnerabilities at sectoral level based on expert assessments and index-based approach. The second one is monitoring anti-corruption policy implementation, which evaluates the implementation of and coverage of anti-corruption measures and policies on the level of individual public institution. And it is intended mostly to serve the management of separate institutions, public institutions, so to be the management to be able to assess the anti-corruption setup that they have in the institution and how to improve it. My colleague Alexander will present it after that, this methodology. And the last one is the analysis of risk of corruption-related behavior in public procurement through the development of original red flag indicators that are based on linked data. And implemented through specially designed and developed online interactive platform, web-based platform that I'll present you in a while, which integrates public procurement data, company financial and ownership information, and media alert system or media data. The three methodologies, the links between them, and all the practical steps, how they can be applied, are described in details in the methodological toolkit which we prepared and which is available online, including for the other methodologies. It contains also the questionnaires that you need to implement these methodologies and so on. So this is a tool that could help you to implement each of the methodologies if you want. The major objectives of risk analysis of corruption-related behavior is to monitor occurrence of suspicious behavior related to state capture and corruption in public procurement. This suspicious behavior could be such as companies winning tender shortly after their incorporation, or companies dependent exclusively on public procurement funds, or different types of suspicious buyer supplier links, favoritism by certain governments of certain companies, and so on. When we're talking about risk analysis of corruption-related behavior here, I want to underline that actually we developed the risk indicators and the respective red flags based on these indicators from the point of view of state capture process. So not so much to trace and monitor single acts of corruption or or some corruption related activities that happen here and there, but we are focused on mechanisms that allow state capture process. So mechanisms that are long-term, that exist in a long term, and that ensure what we call large-scale benefits for the captors. So in a way, the captor to be able to receive or to gain profit in a large scale from the public institutions. So the other objective of our methodology is that it is designed specifically for real-time monitoring. It means that even what I'll show you is based only on historical data for the last 10 years. Actually, it is designed in a way to be possible to be integrated into the e-procurement system of the countries. So to give this to raise these red flags during the procurement process, which means that it could be used, and this is one of the major characteristics of this methodology, it could be used for real-time monitoring of irregularities in procurement process. It also increased transparency through the offering integrated analytics that cover different data types. And of course, it is scalable and transferable across sectors and countries. So it is designed with this idea to be possible to be for application in other sectors and other countries. This is how the general look. I should say that, and you can see the web address of the platform from the QR code. You can scan it and you get the same URL. Actually, it is free for use, but upon registration, so you need to register first. But the registration is free. Okay, I'll go briefly through the resources and data preprocessing that we use to compile the platform and the analytics that it offers. Just to note that most of these things, especially the analytics and analysis, they could be implemented even using some specialized statistical software or even Excel, if you want. But of course, this would be a bit more difficult and will take a bit more time. But I'm saying this to underline that it is possible the same risk indicators and red flags to be developed even outside this platform and to be used by yourself in your own studies. So the platform uses public, in most of the cases, open data. These are public procurement data from the Tenders Electronics Daily database of the European Commission, corporate data, mostly public business registers, but also some private data, but data from some private data providers. I'll tell you why in a while, and also online news media data. The major preprocessing steps that we undertook was to multi-name entity recognition and matching, both for suppliers and buyers. Suppliers, these are companies, while buyers, these are public institutions or contracting entities. What mean multi-name entity recognition and matching? You know that both in the TED database and in the corporate databases, or a single company or a public institution could appear with different names. There are some technical steps to match these different names into a single entity. Then we do a so-called parent-child matching of suppliers or of companies, following the ownership information to see which are the, let's say, the daughter companies or shareholder companies, subsidiaries, and so on. And then we did online media content identification, collection, and matching. What were the challenges with data that we faced? And I'm completely sure that all of you face if you start doing this by yourself. When we did the multi-name entity recognition and matching, of that data, so of procurement data, we faced the problem with missing companies' IDs. We needed to match different names according to other reference fields. Again, looking at the postal address, website, and contact information which is available in the database, it is possible to match the different names that one institution or one company appears with. And then also very often the companies or the public institution appear either with or without their legal forms or type of contracting entity. For example, one time municipality of Madrid or of Sofia could appear as just Sofia or Madrid. The next time could appear as municipality Sofia or Sofia municipality, and so on and so on. I will not enter into the technical details, but there are standardized methods for this recognition and matching that can be used. In terms of corporate data, one of the most important transformation that we did is to identify and match parent-child relationships. It means mother companies and their subsidiaries, because as you can imagine, when you look at the procurement data, you will see only the single legal entities. But if you analyze the group of companies that belongs to the same economic conglomerate or the same beneficial owner at the end, how they win tenders, the result is quite different than if you look at the separated companies in this economic conglomerate. So again, the major challenges were the same when we started to merge data from different sources. Missing IDs, different in the names, but also missing or partial information on company's ownership, particularly outside the country borders. So when you want to trace the parent-child relationship beside the country border, and in this case, actually, we use some private data providers that offer better and more detailed information on companies' company ownership structures. And one of the major challenges is the complex ownership networks that you can have in some cases, and our decision here was to transpose it to a simple parent-child relationship that I'll show you in a while. For online media content identification, collection, and matching, that refers both to buyers and suppliers. We use online media data to extract news from journalistic investigations about suspicious cases of or cases of suspicious behavior related to public procurement. And first, we needed to identify online media sources that we wanted to use, avoiding non-media sources and personal sites, blogs, and so on as not reliable sources of information. So we used only formal media sources, let's say. Then to set up keywords and search queries for corruption and public procurement, but not for buyers and suppliers names, which was our first idea. But then we found that because the buyers and suppliers names are thousands, the search queries produce quite a lot of what we called false positives. So many news that refer to the normal business activities of these companies and so on, that are not useful for such an analysis. When we're looking only for news related to cases of suspicious behavior, related to corruption and state capture. So for that reason, first we collected a data set of media news related to corruption and public procurement. And then we filtered this data set according to the names of companies and public institutions that we already have in our database. For this, we used an external service offered by Sensica, but you can, it's a company offering media monitoring, but you can use also other external services that exist for media monitoring, like, for example, Newsweep or some others, including Google is offering quite good APIs and also advanced search that can be used. One of the challenges that we also faced was when we filtering media articles data set according to the companies and public institutions names, was the common words that exist in the names of some companies that produce a lot of non-relevant articles, also abbreviated names, differences in the names, and so on. Again, there are some technical means how to avoid this. I will not stop here. The analytical platform web-based platform that we produce offers 4 main features: ranking of both awarded companies and contracting entities, and the ranking could be done by industry or sector, by location, for example, a municipality or a city, and by country, including multiple countries. So the rankings could be international or national, depending on what kind of filtering options you select. Profiling, which offers buyer's profile and supplier's profile. Red flags, which is one of the most important functions of this platform, and market sizing, or sectoral market analytics. The platform has its own technical specification guide where each indicator and including the red flags are explained, including with their formulas, how they are computed. So if you want to replicate some of this or all of this, you can look at these details. I'll go very briefly through the different options. As I said, the ranking is available for both companies and contracting entities by location, by country, or by sector, and it offers some metrics like contracts award frequency, size of contracts awards in euro, average value of contracts, recent success in the last 12 months as compared to the company's historical performance, and this is available only for awarded companies. And this is quite important indicator if the methodology is used in real time, so as a tool tool for monitoring irregularities in procurement process. Here's an example screen from the ranking option of the platform. On the left side, you have to select the different filters, and on the right side, you receive as a result table which ranks the companies according to the filters. In this case, total value of contracts for two of the countries, Bulgaria and Romania, for wholesaler fuels, and you can see at the top total value of contract of Lukoil Bulgaria, which is one of the biggest, actually the biggest company in Bulgaria, is at the top because it has the highest value of contracts for the selected period. Then you have the profiling, which offers interactive analytics, which combines public procurement, corporate and media data with red flags indicators. It visualizes the assessment of the risk of state capture and corruption within particular contracting entity or company. Also offers information about parent-child corporate relationships and offshore involvement, as well as suspicious news for these companies or contracting entities. In order to make it more useful, we decided to have a profiling threshold. So only parent companies are shown in the rankings. But if you go to the profile of the parent company, you can see the subsidiaries of these companies and go to their profiles and so on. These are the data points or metrics that are available for both the contracting entity profile and our company. I will not stop here. These are some of the examples. I'll skip them and we'll go directly to the to show you how it looks. You can see here a company profile of one Bulgarian company called Automagistrali. This is a public-owned company. Automagistrali is highways. So it's a public-owned construction company specialized in construction of highways and roads. And I selected it because you can see very well, this is quite a big company. It has in last 10 years 15 tenders on a total amount of 879 millions and something more and so on. And as you can see here, from these so-called government terms, which is one of the red flags that I will show you in a while, actually it receives the whole amount of this during only one government. And it is because, here you can see that the only contracting entity that actually gives this amount to this company is agency Road Infrastructure, which is again a state-owned agency that contract construction of roads and highways. There are suspicious news about the activity of this company and so on. So this is one of the cases of state capture that have been actually investigated by some journalists in Bulgaria in last years, especially for this concentration of public money into one public-owned company, which is totally untransparent. Then you can see here an example of the institutional profile of this state agency on road infrastructure, which was the contracting entity. And as you can see here, again, in 2019, when was the in 2018-19, when was the last government of Mr. Borisov, the money that this public institution allocated increased actually in times. So it's again, and here you can see who received this money, and of course this company highways or Automagistrali is on the first place with the biggest amount and with the most tenders out of the others. So you can trace in this way the suspicious behavior of companies and public authorities. As I said, one of the most important functions is the risk indicators and the red flags. Risk indicators are based on theoretical and methodological framework for state capture assessment that we developed, and they present different risky situations, let's say, for example, tenders that are won by very few companies or ultimate owners behind these companies. Tenders are often won by very new or unknown companies, or companies that are just established very shortly before to win their first tenders. And so on and so on. Based on these risk indicators, we developed 4 groups of red flags based on linked data, so on analysis that integrate procurement data, company ownership and financial data, and media data. The first group of indicators of red flags, refers to concentration levels, so to buyer concentration index and supplier concentration index. I'll show you an example after that and to explain what it means. To high exposure to procurement, when you have procurement exposure ratio by revenue or by net income or by total assets or by number of employees. All this shows when, for example, a single company do not have enough employees, but has a very high amount, but won a very high amount of tenders. And how we define what means not enough employees in this case, this is based on analysis of peer companies. So when you look at the ratio of tenders that have been won, either in terms of amount of tender or number of tenders, and number of employees for a given period of time, we ranked companies according to their ratios, and the highest the companies that are at the top of this ranking, we note them as we present them as with red flag for this ratio. So they most probably have some there are most probably some suspicions about corruption-related behavior that allows them to want to win so many tenders with so less employees. And here you can see how it looks. The red flags that you can see in the table actually indicates whether the company has what's the ratio, and as many as red flags the company has, so the ratio is worse, let's say. I can show you how it looks for the others for the others red flags. Just a moment. I think that yes, this is how it looks. And if you go down, you'll see that the number of red flags decrease. So Yes. Then you can, here we have also the red flag of government terms volatility, which means that actually these companies have win tenders during the time period of a specific government. And here is one such an example, which is very clear. You can see this is a company called Sofia Gas, and you see that all of their tenders are concentrated in only 2 years, and this actually coincides totally with the one of the governments and the next one, and which was actually an interim government. And this is normal because you know that when one tender is contracted, the process of contracting takes quite a lot of time, sometimes more than a year. So it's normal that tenders that started in this government or tender procedures that started during this government have been continued in the next months after the government rejected actually. So this is a quite good example how this company was favoritized by this government, and then it disappeared actually. So the company is still alive, it is still working, we check this, and this could be seen from the company profile, but it stopped winning tenders. Okay. The red flags allows also some aggregated analytics. Based not only looking at the single company or single public authority, contracting authority, but also if you extract the aggregated analytics from the platform, you can make some additional statistical analysis and these provide better overview of vulnerability to suspicious behavior in public procurement on country level, which is very important, and also on the side of suppliers and buyers if you look for a specific supplier or buyer. And also and this is very important, this additional aggregated analytics allow for design of preventive measures and policies on institutional, sector, and national level. So when you do this analysis, you can use the results to see whether these vulnerabilities are, and to design some preventive measures about them. Here you see the example of red flags aggregated analytics. What does it mean? It means that in Bulgaria we have different concentration. This is the so-called bioconcentration index, different concentration of suppliers that want more than, for example, 90% of their funding from a single entity. In this case, there are 26 public entities or contracting entities in Bulgaria that allocate more than 20% of their tenders to a single supplier. And in this case of these 26 public entities, contracting entities, they allocate more than 90% of their tenders to 52 suppliers during the different years, because here this analysis is made for the longer possible period in our data, and the whole amount of that these suppliers one from these tenders is above 1.5 billion actually. And looking at both of the number of red flag buyers and number of suppliers and also allocated amount to these suppliers, you can see that actually Bulgaria and Italy and Spain, sorry, has, let's say, worse results in terms of buyer concentration index, while Romania has much better results than the others. This is another example of aggregated analytics, which is about procurement exposure per employee. It means that on the left axis, you have average amount from tenders per employee. And on the right axis, you have number of companies ranked highest according to the ratio of awarded amounts per employee. So in Bulgaria, you have 21 companies that have average amount of almost $500,000 early per a single employee or per capita. Like the investigations of this Automagistrali company that I show you, the company profile shows, they have 84 employees, but they implement tenders for millions, for dozens of millions, only with 84 employees, which of course is not possible, let's say. In this case, 37 companies in Romania have been outlined or red flagged also, and so on and so on. And as you can see, in Italy, actually, there are no such companies. So this red flag shows that in this case, Italy is not red flagged, let's say, so it's not risky. The market sizing option in the platform offers a macro comparison on sectoral level, and it is more like a background to give you a background about the procurement market and how it stays within the whole economy also. So it's used mostly as the metrics that it offers are used mostly as background metrics. I will not stop here, but we'll finish with the challenges that we faced to risk analysis. First of all, when we created the risk indicators and the red flags, we found that companies' parent-child relationships very often undermine the state capture. So the parent-child relationship and state capture mechanisms are quite contradictory, because if you have a captor that has a couple of companies, because usually this is the case, and these companies are working in different sectors and are offering different services. One of the company works in construction, another works, for example, in supply of foods for kindergartens and schools and so on and so on. Then it's very difficult to look at sectoral level, because this actually disaggregates the company structure of the captor into different single entities. And if you look at the single entity, you can't see actually the state capture signs, let's say, or you see only some of these signs. And in this case, this is a challenge that is very important, because when you want to see the real picture, it actually, you have to look actually at, let's say, the whole economy, if possible, or at least at several sectors, and not to limit yourself only to a single sector, because it limits the power of analysis. Of course, inconsistency and availability of procurement and corporate data are offer quite a lot of challenges. I will not stop here, and also availability and reliability of media data, including identifications of relevant media content. So this is something that have to be carefully manually checked by the researchers, because very often the relevance of media data could be I would say could be not very high. So the reliability of media data sometimes is problematic. Let me stop with this. Thank you very much. And I would like to open the session for questions, if you have any.
So I'm going to present you something slightly different. I hope you can see my slides any moment now. So this is a management instrument about monitoring anti-corruption policy implementation. The abbreviation Magpie comes from here. It was developed in 2014-2015 for the first time, and piloted then for public organizations with the support of DG Home, and it received high praise for the end result, and since then it has been implemented in a variety of public organizations. You can see municipalities, Ministry of Defense, Traffic Police, Border Police, Labor Inspectorate, Public Procurement Agency, tax authorities in Montenegro, National Integrity Agency in Italy, Anti-Corruption Agency in Romania, several municipalities. In fact, in 3 countries, and in Romania too. The latest implementation was in Romania, and it provides data about the implementability, implementation, and effectiveness of anti-corruption policy at the level of public organizations, and it is mainly used. Can be used by the management of the organization to improve their anti-corruption policy setup. It is directed towards curbing administrative corruption or low-level corruption, as it is sometimes called, to distinguish it from high-level corruption. However, we found out during our studies on state capture that administrative corruption at the level of public organizations can leave an organization very vulnerable to state capture too. And since state capture is very difficult to tackle, apart from exposing it, we find that this too is the best way to address the problem with potential state capture too, by increasing the resilience of public organization to administrative corruption. And you can see here how this all fits in the integrated tool Todor mentioned, developed as part of the SchemApps project. While the analytics go down from more general assessment of the state capture symptoms at the country or at the sectoral level to very concrete examples of suspicious behavior, which Todor just presented. Then the response can be on the one hand through investigations by the relevant authorities or by investigating journalists, and through increasing the resilience of the anti-corruption policies of public organizations. For example, the Road Infrastructure Agency Todor mentioned, which came up with its suspicious behavior in 2019, it could definitely use Magpie scan and long-term monitoring. And Magpie is also described in this methodological toolkit. It is one of the three main methodologies used in the integrated tool. You can read more details there. These are the main indicators which Magpie uses, and in the columns you can see the different tools which are under the Magpie hood, let's say, under the larger Magpie framework. The main tool is the Magpie officials survey, which is conducted among the officials of the organization. And as I mentioned, it is a management tool, so there are no sensitive questions. So the officials can self-rate their organizations in most of the cases. In few cases where the organization has deeply rooted problems, it is possible that the officials don't provide honest scores, or rather try to present their organization in much more favorable light than it is the reality. In this case, Magpie experts and Magpie clients is used as external assessment tools to verify the answers of the officials. So these four instruments are complementary to each other, but the most important one is Magpie officials, since if there is no political will to improve the situation, then there is no real purpose of Magpie apart from exposing some discrepancies in the answers of officials. So this tool is created with good intentions. It does not expose any corruption behavior. Let's say this is part of the Magpie clients instrument, which is a victimization survey. So Magpie officials, it is, and Magpie in general, it is focused on improving things which hopefully are already more or less good. And you can see this in the Magpie diagnostic cycle, which starts with the benchmarking scan, which is intended to provide some initial levels, because the organization is always compared to itself. The policies and the corruption pressure levels are compared to the previous one, with the intention of constantly improving the anti-corruption policy setup. And these are the main stages of Magpie implementation. Since this is a training, I will go in more details on how to do Magpie. And of course, you can read the toolkit where things are really very detailed, with the different instruments like questionnaires provided in the appendix, so you can find all the details there. The first step is the preparation. The Magpie team gets familiar with the organization, contacts the organization. They organize a meeting to meet the representative from the organization and to explain how Magpie works. And the main output of this step is a list of activities of the organization. I will get to it in a second. The second stage is an in-depth interview where the anti-corruption policies are listed through a process I will get in details in a moment. And then we move to the Magpie official surveys, which is, as I said, the main instrument of Magpie. The others are optional. Magpie experts and Magpie clients can be conducted if there are enough resources. Magpie experts is not that difficult. It uses the same questionnaire as Magpie officials, but the target group are external experts who are not part of the organization. However, Magpie clients use a victimization survey approach, so it is conducted with larger sample among the clients. By clients, we mean citizens or businesses who are in contact with the organization regarding their activity, and it is not always possible to define the clients in a survey-friendly way. Let's say, for example, the border police, the clients here, quote unquote, we are interested in are basically for example, illegal migrants, because there is the corruption risk is there. However, they are very difficult to access. Usually, it comes up how the things work during interviews of refugees sometimes. However, it is not possible to conduct a quantitative survey. And in a sense, for the border police, the whole society is a client. They work for the benefit of the whole society. However, the risk groups are difficult to access. However, in comparison for the traffic police, then the clients are the car drivers, so they're very easy to access through an online survey, and there the victimization rates, or how often they were asked for a bribe, can be actually measured. The next step is the computation of the Magpie indicators I showed briefly, and I will get in more details soon. And finally, the analysis of the data, or what the numbers mean, and the presentation to the management is conducted, and the technical report is usually sent to the management of the organization, while if the management agrees, an analytical report is published, and this is usually very good in when long-term monitoring is conducted, and it shows that the organization is transparent. This analytical report does not contain any revelation for corruption, grade scandals, or anything like that, but it shows the political will to improve, and that the organization is really transparent, because there are many public organizations actually have their own procedures for corruption risk assessment. However, they're hidden, they're not public, and basically the corruptor self-assess themselves without reporting the results. So we think that doing Magpie through an external organization and publishing the results would be a much better way to guarantee at least transparency. And let me go in some more details about the different steps. So the preparation, usually during the preparation, the research team reads the activities from the website and does an initial draft. Then this draft of activities is discussed with the representatives of the organization, and the list should be condensed to 5 to 10 activities, so that it is easier to do the survey, because some larger organizations can have many activities, but usually they can be clustered in different groups, so that the list is no longer than 10 activities. Then during the in-depth interviews, this table is filled in. In this table, the representatives of the organization, who are also representatives of the management, or the management itself in smaller organizations, are asked to assess is there potential corruption interest for each of the activities for different types of corruption. And this represents their view on where the corruption risks are, where is corruption possible, because if there is an activity, for example, cleaning the corridors of the organization, no one will have corruption interest to bribe the janitor to clean better or worse. And in other cases, however, there is definitely corruption interest to make the officials deviate from what they are supposed to do. So here, this represents the view of the management, and where they say that potential corruption interest is present, we ask them to tell us what are their anti-corruption measures to counter this potential corruption risk. And through this, we draft a very preliminary list of anti-corruption policies, and show the management what the logic of Magpie more or less is. and then this draft list of anti-corruption policies is sent to them for approval and for editing, and the end result should be like this. Here the list of activities is a bit lengthy. However, the organization insisted that some activities were added, but usually it is between 5 and 10 activities, and the list of anti-corruption policies is usually between 10 and 15. With some policies like ethical codes, codes of conduct, and so on, they are grouped together usually. Same for trainings, because there are different types of anti-corruption trainings. Usually all types of anti-corruption trainings can be grouped in one larger group of policies. And this is another example from the National Revenue Agency. I should mention here that the activities usually include human resources and public procurement. However, we analyzed in the preparatory stage how many public tenders the National Revenue Agency had, and we decided that this is not an important activity for this organization, so it is skipped here. However, it is usually included, especially in organizations like municipality or other larger buyers. And the Magpie official survey, it is done either with the representative sample of at least 400 employees for large organizations. By large, we mean above 1,000 employees. These are usually municipalities or other very large organizations like the border police, for example. While for a smaller organization, Magpie also works. There, every one of the employees receives the link, so we use their exhaustive sampling, or everyone is invited to participate, and we usually ask for at least half of the employees of such small organizations to take part in the survey, so there are enough data points to conduct the computations of the indexes. And let me show you how a survey looks. It is preferable that a specialized software is used which can handle filters. Filters mean that here we ask the participants if their work is related to any of the following activities, and they selected 3 activities. Then in the following groups of questions, we ask them only about these 3 activities, because if the officials are not familiar and they don't work in a particular activity, they can't really assess them reliably. So it is preferable that the online survey software can handle this automatically. And this is how a survey looks like. It is absolutely anonymous, and it is the division of labor, let's say, is that the external organization handles the data, the raw answers. Raw answers are not provided to the management or to anyone else, so the anonymity is preserved. And the recruitment process, or the sending of the link, is handled by the public organization. They send the link to their employees. So the researchers don't know who answered the survey, while the management doesn't know what they answered. So it is strictly anonymous. Then the next step is the actual computation of the indicators, and you can see an example here, but the technical details are in the toolkit. They are not difficult to compute. Usually they're closely linked to the actual questions. For example, the indicator outside pressure associated with activity is the percentage of people who answer that there is some level of pressure, high, medium, or low. These are 3 of the 4 answers to this question. And there is another way to compute the indicators, because the percentages, they work if there are at least, let's say, 20 respondents per activity. However, in smaller organization, it is possible that there are 3, 4, 5 respondents per activity. Then it is much better to compute the scale with averages. And usually we present also the standard error to show how the answers differ from each other. And here, for example, the outside pressure associated with activity is computed on a scale from 1 to 4, where 1 is no pressure at all and 4 is high pressure. Similarly, with the policies, there are 3 large groups of indicators: implementability, implementation, effectiveness. And each of the sub-indicators is computed in the same way, either as average on all the questions use Likert scales, so average can be computed, or as percentages for larger organizations, mainly because the percentages are much easier to read and understand than, for example, 2.9 number. Still, for smaller organization, it makes no sense to compute the percentage of 4 people. And this is why we recommend using averages for such cases. Finally, the analysis of the data include ranking of the different policies in terms of implementability, implementation, and effectiveness, and ranking of the activities in terms of corruption pressure, both actual and estimated. This ranking shows relatively which are the most effective, the least effective policies, the highest corruption pressure activities, the lowest corruption pressure activities. So during the first benchmarking scan, the main analysis which can be conducted is vulnerability zones analysis, which basically looks for high corruption pressure activities which receive low coverage. They are not covered by many anti-corruption policies, or they are covered by very ineffective or not well implemented anti-corruption policies. And when such vulnerability zones are discovered, they are presented to the management with the recommendation to add additional anti-corruption policies or to improve, let's say, control for how well the anti-corruption policies are observed and conducted. And sometimes when there are Magpie experts and Magpie clients, discrepancy analysis can be conducted, or it can also be conducted between employees without management status and employees with some management functions. Sometimes they provide very different answers, and when there are large discrepancies between the assessment scores of the 2 groups, this shows there might be a problem there. And the long-term monitoring, as I said, this is what Magpie is intended for. Long-term monitoring, it provides the most important data, whether corruption pressure declines and the effectiveness of anti-corruption policies increases, and the implementation when implementation is not high enough. Here you can see an example of what I just said. This table shows the coverage with anti-corruption policies on the rows and activities on the columns. And the actual corruption pressure is how, what percentage of the employees involved in this activity were asked for a bribe. Here we consider high percentage of this indicator to be indicative of actual corruption taking place, because when there is pressure, usually there are some activities too. So you can see that in activity 2, the actual corruption pressure is low and the coverage is very high. The black cells represent good coverage. So this activity is covered with 8 different anti-corruption policies and somewhat by other 2 as well. However, for example, activity 4 receives very high actual corruption pressure scores. but there is not a single anti-corruption policy which is directed specifically to this activity. This is another example. These are the same, these are activity 2 and 3. And here we provide what these activities actually entail. The well-covered activity is public procurement. So it is very well covered. However, you can see that the next activity, which is preparation of tenders and specifications, participation in procurement and contracting, it is not so well covered, and the actual corruption pressure is much higher there. So these two activities are very closely linked. You can't have public procurement without the preparation of tenders and specifications, and it shows how things happen, where the vulnerability is, and how this organization might be attacked if someone wants to fix a tender through the preparation of the specification and documentation. So it is not enough that the actual procurement process is well covered with anti-corruption policies. These other related activities should also be so well covered through very specific policies like rotation of the people who participate in the committees and so on. And here you can see just 2 examples, and I'm going to wrap it up. Here you can see an example of the discrepancies in the Bulgarian border police. The border security activity was assessed as much more risky than by the management than by regular employees, and this is natural because the regular employees are trying to hide that there are any corruption risks there. However, what is interesting is that the preventive investigation activity received somewhat higher scores for corruption pressure from the regular employees. And the most interesting thing at least for me, is that the public procurement received relatively high scores by both regular employees and management. And indeed, after this benchmarking scan was conducted in 2015, and we mentioned public procurement as a potential vulnerability, there were some public procurement related scandals in the following years. So we found this ahead of time, and in fact some positive changes were made, and the next wave, the next year, we found that things improved a little. Of course, this is a long-term process. As I mentioned, this should be done at least biannually, and this should be made public so that such issues are found ahead of time, and everyone can see where the potential vulnerabilities are and whether the organization is trying to fix them. And with this illustrates the ideal case where an organization does Magpie every year. Unfortunately, it is only a hypothetical case so far, but we hope that some organizations will be willing to adopt Magpie for annual use. So far, we have conducted Magpie for several times in the same organizations, in some of the organizations. And with this, I will end my training. You can download the toolkit, which was recently published. It is on the left, and on the right, it is a book published in 2015, which covers the theoretical aspects of this anti-corruption policy assessment and monitoring. It is also helpful to understand the logic behind the theoretical logic behind these indicators. Thank you.